they are highly perishable. These produce that are highly perishable are categorized in the categories of legumes, tubers, fruits, and vegetables. Now, most of these particular produce, by the time they get to the market, the people who are selling them have a very short time to sell those produce, to be able to gain the money they invested into those produce. So as a result of this, they have losses. At the end of the day, if it's tomato seller, pepper seller, onion seller, lettuce seller, by the time they make these investments into this produce and they try to sell them, there is what? There is a challenge if they cannot sell those produce at the time required. Because of what? Highly perishable nature of those produce. Now, how do we address these aspects of low produce? One of the major ways we've been able to address low produce perishability, those which have low level of storage after harvest. Most of these produce undergo this challenge because of what we call mechanical damage. The method of harvest, the method of storing those produce after harvest, the approach you use in this actually increases the shelf life or reduces the shelf life of the farm produce. So what is the challenge that most of us face here is that how do we address perishability of highly perishable farm produce after post-harvest? This affects the farmers, affects the processors, affects the marketers along the chain, isn't it? So what we came up with indigenously here in Nigeria is that we have come to understand that most of the fabricators we have here in Nigeria, they do not take into cognizance what we call precision. Precision in design. That is when you actually come up with a design, you have measurements associated with the design. You have precision positions for various parts of that design. So when you go to your processors, they will not follow the instruction according to how the design is meant to be. All they just want to do is fabricate that thing, let it just do exactly what you are giving them. So by the time you come to implement this particular technology in dehydration, it will not deliver according to expectation. Maybe you want to dry sweet potato, you want to dry yam or cassava, or you want to keep cassava fresh for like 6 months in such a way that you don't want it dry, and you want to transport it from here to South Africa or to Brazil where it will be changed to ethanol, because you have the transitional phases. One particular product can give you 10 different transitions. Some require the transition to be dry, some require the transition to be fresh, some require it to be either in powder form before it goes into transition. So for our dehydrators, like I earlier said, we are dealing with dehydrators. Dehydration technology, basically, it's a technology which requires you to remove moisture content in freshly harvested farm produce. Those produce that have just been immediately harvested. Now, for you to render the hydration process to them, most people use heat. Some people use direct sunshine. Like if you are coming from Abuja, Akwanga Road, you see cassava on the roadside. Some people will dry their paddy rice after harvest on the roadside. Of course, we know that there's a percentage content for each particular rice you harvest before it goes into processing, isn't it? So dehydration is totally different from drying. Drying like drying fish, drying meat. This requires high heat that does not have the need for controlled temperature. But when it comes to dry farm produce, these things you see that they use in making the starch flour, the potato powder, and otherwise before packaging, they require low heat dehydration. So majority of the fabricators in Jos have had this challenge to have what we call low heat dehydration approach for their dehydrators. So majority of them at the end of the day, you find that either the product, by the time it is being dried, it is cooked. It's completely cooked. I remember some dryers were given to us at some time. They came with charcoal. So you want to try and dry something like mango. By the time you finish drying